Hey everyone, welcome back to another great episode of The Human Role. So today, I don't even feel like he needs an introduction, but we've got the one and only Pete Tiliakos. Woo! That's great. Look, Pete is well known in our industry. If you don't know him, I don't know what you're doing, but we know him as our top tier analyst. He is also co-host of HR and Payroll 2.0 and the founder of Payroll Influences. So all the good things in our payroll space. And we naturally look to him to give us all the guidance on what's going on in the industry. So Pete, really excited to have you here with me today. Thank you so much for spending time with us. And if you guys don't know, Pete is getting kicked off with the survey, Payroll Profession Confidence Index, right? The PPCI. And wanted to just get the word out, help you all understand what the survey is, what it means, how you can support it, how it can support you and all of us in the payroll industry. So, Pete, before we dip into that and get into our survey, I'd love to just hear what you've been up to. How's your summer been? What's been, what's new with Pete Tiliakos?
Yeah, well, look, thanks for having me, and thanks for that amazing introduction. It's very glowing. I appreciate you. Well, look, we've both, been here. I know I have been home in Atlanta. Summer is a little bit more of an off time for analysts when it comes to travel. So I've been just trying to catch up with folks like you. We took in a Braves game. That was a lot of fun. Hot, but a lot of fun. Shout out to Julie Devlin and some of the folks that came with us. I just been really trying to catch up on work, get my research ready to go, and get back out there in fall. The conference, season kicks off very early in spring, in September. And then, it's just going to be heads down from there. So, just kicked off the PPCI, got a bunch of content swirling around and thought we could come and just share it with your audience.
Yes, here we go. So you guys, tune in, listen loud and clear. So let's start with, I guess, the origin of the story, right? Like what made you realize that payroll needed something like the PPCI? Maybe just get us some background details and we can kind of get into the nitty gritty from there.
Yeah. So look, it's very unique. It's very personal for me as a former practitioner. I came up in the HR and payroll world, and payroll is somewhere I spent a lot of my career. Led payroll at Disney for some time. I think most people know that by now. I've worked for a few of the vendors. I worked in PEO. I worked for some of the big vendors. Look, as a professional researcher and as an industry analyst, I'm constantly researching and working with practitioners and leaders like yourself about what's going on, right? Where's the ball going? Where are the trends? Where are the key things happening? And one of the things that I noticed about the payroll research that we have available in the market, there was really only maybe, I would say, 3 flavors of that. And that was, to me, not serving the industry at its fullest, right? It was really serving and telling only a partial story. And so you can imagine those 3 buckets would really kind of orient around, 3 key things. One, being much of the research was slanted towards technology. What do you have? What can we sell you, right? Vendors creating a story that says payroll needs technology, which they absolutely unequivocally do, right? More so than maybe any of us. We're counting everything right down to the penny. We want everything perfect. Payroll needs that. But that's an obvious thing, right? Like everything needs technology. I like to say Chick-fil-A needs technology, right? Every experience we have is tech enabled. It should be that way. So that's a given. So then the other thing you would see from the payroll research that would come out, and this is very valuable, right? Places like the APQC, I believe Deloitte and some others have done very good benchmark studies to tell you things like what your operation should cost, how efficient it should or shouldn't be based on headcount, all the things that you would want to have in an operational metric sort of perspective. Very valuable, right? For benchmarking and making decisions about right-sizing your organization, all of that. But again, not telling the whole story. And then the third thing I think that was available was a lot of the payroll research that's out there, and you could see this too with HR research in terms of ROI, was telling this story that said, well, the only way that you'll get any ROI from payroll is if you strip it down to what I would call hospice, payroll hospice, right? Do just enough, give it just enough resources, just enough people, just enough spend so that we don't have any problems and it continues to stay on track. So I saw an opportunity to tell the whole story, right? What about the people? What about the process? What about the relationships? What about where does the real value come from? Because there has to be a greater story to that value than just technology and getting rid of everyone, right? And I knew that answer from having lived it, just like you have, and many of your audience. And I said, we've got to tell this story in a way that becomes trusted, right? Everything in payroll we do has to be trusted. We have to trust the data we see, the data we put out. And that was the root of this. And so, yeah, that's where this came from.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I would say, our group, and we know this within our group, there's a lot of advocacy, right? Because we, to your point, have lived in these seats. We definitely are constantly overlooked, I feel like, on the payroll side of things. And a lot of times people don't equate payroll to tech, or they don't equate payroll to being more than just clicking a button, right? And there is so much more.
Bookkeeping.
There's compliance, there's tons of things. We legitimately, I would say, in my opinion, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, are the only department that touches everybody. I mean, we're literally, we may not be bringing in naturally the bread and the butter, but we are making sure the bread and the butter is okay, and W-2s get filed okay, and, paychecks get going. So that is really, really important. And I think surveys like this really help put a light on that, right? Where we're here, we're not just lost in a little corner. Like, we are important, and we need to pay attention to what we're doing. And trust but verify is always a very critical thing, because from the start, from when someone is being recruited, all of that gets filtered in to their first paycheck and repeated.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the spirit. That's the goal of this research, is to communicate to the C-suites of the world that payroll is not like equivalating payroll to bookkeeping is the same as equivalating HR purely to personnel administration, right? That completely undersells the value and the impact and the severity of what they can contribute and the I would say the outcomes of what they're able to provide, business outcomes they're able to provide when it's understood, measured, resourced properly, and engaged. And that's what I'm hoping we can measure and change.
I would say, look, historically, payroll's been looked at as being behind the scenes. You're at lots of client sites, right? You deal with the big dogs, I like to say, pretty often. I know we have typically been behind the scenes, but with the push that you're doing, our whole network is doing, the survey is doing, do you think payroll is starting to get a seat at the table? Do you think that's coming? I'm like 50-50, but love your insight there.
Yeah, look, I've been asked 1,000 times about like the chief payroll officer. Like, do we need a chief payroll officer? I helped launch the 30 by 30 at Chime with Jason Lee. And I love it, right? I love the awareness. I love the focus. But let's be realistic, right? Is payroll realistically belong in the C-suite? I don't know. And I don't know if that will ever change. But what I can say is that what I think businesses are increasingly understanding, and that's my whole point of this work, is to say, hey, look, I have this platform, right? I have all of the vendors, most of the vendors as clients, letting me research and see what they're doing under the hood. Many of them I'm advising, and I have for a decade. I'm a practitioner who's lived this. How do I use all that platform and that understanding and that research and information and access that I have to bring more light and voice to the payroll leaders of the world and really communicate what they're doing? And I do think we are making progress, right? We're starting to hear strategic payroll. We're starting to hear strategy and payroll together. But what I think we have to get focused on is not so much about payroll being in the C-suite or payroll being strategic or not. That debate may go on forever. What I think we have to be talking about is payroll being a part of and integrated. And I don't mean technologically. That's a given. Everything should be integrated technologically. Payroll needs to be deeply woven into and have a line of sight into all of the strategic direction of the business and what HR is trying to execute against for that business. And when they have that line of sight, they have the resources, they have that communication between their leadership team, and they are integrated in the decision-making and the governance and and they are bringing their resources and expertise to the table to help avoid risk and help execute on strategy. Now payroll starts to become a business outcome, right? It becomes org agility. It becomes scalability. It becomes valuable. And that's what we've done with the PPCI. I don't know if you know this or if your audience does, but in addition to just researching, obviously, what's going on, taking the pulse and understanding the relationships and the sentiment and the value output from payroll, we have also created frameworks to say, what should strategic payroll actually look like? What are the byproducts of strategic impact payroll should be able to provide? And that's the 5 pillars of modern payroll. It's a key framework in the research. But then there's also now last year we launched the ROI, the modern ROI, modern payroll ROI scorecard. It's a mouthful. Basically, a scorecard style framework for how you could measure payroll in a way that is not traditionally looking at cost reduction, just the baseline things you would use to sort of steer the vehicle. Yes, you have to do that. You have to know the FTEs and the outputs and the costs and all of that. But what about payroll's value of their insight to the business? What about the risk that they avoid? What's the value of that? What if you had to hire a Big Four consultant to come and give you that advice? What would that be worth? What's the innovation worth? What's their impact on the employee and the pay experience? You could just, you can go on and on. But the point here is to try and reframe payroll, reframe their value in business terms, and integrate them into the business's strategy so that they can help the business actually execute and block and tackle for them effectively. And so, yeah, I know it's a lot, but that's really the mission here, is to try and, amplify those organizations or those voices out there that are in organizations that are struggling, but also that are striving and really, really doing interesting things with their strategic engagement, and tell that story so that others can learn from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything's teachable moments, I guess you can say, right? Or
Yeah,
most promising. And I feel like we're just like payroll is starting to get its own voice. At one
it
point,
is. It
you could
is.
just be overlooked. And it does seem like there's more traction around it, right? Because, you know,
Yeah.
if you have not experienced this, to everyone out there, consider yourself lucky. But if people don't get paid on payroll, or if things are wrong, it just makes your whole day is going
Well,
wrong.
let me take that a step further, Tiana. Look, listen, I wear my shirts that I talk about, my hashtag payroll influences everything, because I believe and know that, right? I've lived, you mentioned in the beginning of the show about how payroll is woven into everything. It really is. Payroll often knows more about what's going on in the business than anybody else, just because of that byproduct of being downstream.
Yeah.
But what I think people don't understand, I don't know if business leaders understand this, is that payroll is the only back office process, the only process in the organization, short of accounting in a major publicly traded firm, where you can go to prison for the outcome being incorrect. In other words, if payroll doesn't do their job, if taxes aren't paid on time, if the right entities aren't, reported to and paid and all of that, it starts with notices, and it escalates, and it escalates to bolts on the door and people being arrested. And it can happen. Now, does it happen all that often? Not always, but I can give you plenty of examples in large corporations and small, where that could be possible. And I don't know that the business leaders of many of the C-suites really understand that danger that they operate in. There is a world of danger on the other side of those payroll errors that is very impactful to business strategy if it's not avoided, if you will.
Yeah.
So
Very true. I
yeah,
mean, we're in the consulting space together. Lots of times companies have been skating by. So when I
yeah,
do bring a risk to them, hey, you're doing this and there's a risk, it's like, we haven't been, that's never come across. It's like, okay, we'll wait till in
yeah.
August. you
Fines
know,
and penalties come.
yes.
They start as letters, right? They start as just paper, and then it begins to compound, and I've seen it. I've been in organizations where I have big enterprises where I've stepped in and helped remediate. And it's been very, very dangerous. They've had very, very bad situations that could have shut down business entities and caused a
Yes.
real disruption to M&A and other things going on. So it's a real risk. It's a very serious risk.
Yes. Very true. Well, wanted to pick one thing. So I know you mentioned the 5
Yeah.
pillars of, modern payroll, the modern payroll ROI scorecard that you just mentioned. So, with the organizations that you're connected with, what do you think they're getting wrong necessarily? When they're trying to measure the value of ROI of payroll today. I mean, where are maybe some gaps in that side of the house?
Well, look, we already know, if you look at my research and you look at the 5 pillars and we measure organizations that are performing at the highest level against all of those 5, it's only about 6%. So
Okay.
we know we have a massive amount of work to do to bring that up, right? And it's not to say that there aren't investments being made and companies making a lot of progress, but there's still a lot to go. And it has a lot to do with really attitude and engagement of payroll. It's the attitude towards what payroll should provide the business, not so much the attitude towards how can we make it cheaper, right? And I think, again, making one of your most consequential to the business, as we've illustrated, and to the workforce, which ultimately is a business problem or concern, or can be a positive. Ignoring and neglecting that just makes absolutely no sense. So I think where we need to make more progress around that is companies first understanding, I wouldn't say admitting, but understanding and taking a new lens on what payroll can provide versus saying, hey, this is purely a cost center. This is purely an output of process, right? Versus looking at it more as a business partner, a big four consultant type, a strategic advisor, and someone who is going to, be a change agent and an innovator in the organization to lead the business toward process improvement and business outcomes. And so I think it starts with that lens, right? Getting that lens shaped to say, hey, and then that's where I feel like, giving the 5 pillars was a step towards saying, look, Tiana, we've whipped HR and payroll for years and said, be more strategic. Only until recently have we actually defined that for the people, right? And so now if we define this and say, well, look, this is what you should be trying to enable your payroll to provide. This is what it should be providing you. If it's not providing you, you're behind. And oh, by the way, now here's a highly conceptual way to measure it. Again, that would take a lot of maturity, and it would also take a lot of folks changing their lens on how they see payroll and then engaging in an exercise to say, how can we measure this? How can we measure the value of our payroll? So really just change starts with that change, honestly.
No,
Not
that's
a
great.
big part of it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. I love just not having payroll as an aftermath. I love just having, payroll
Yeah.
that seat at the table. I think that solves a good chunk of it, right? Like if we're there ahead of the game when decisions are being made and things are being talked about, and with our knowledge base, that does change a lot of things. Do you think
Yeah.
that with AI, that AI has kind of helped speed up the technology side of things, or
Yeah.
do you think payroll might have always been a bit on the tech side? No one just realized until recently.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big help. I think because now, you've got attention to these back office processes that haven't had a lot of love in the past, right? I mean, I've been calling it payroll's golden age. I don't know if that's really, the right way to call it, but that's what I've been calling it now for about 4 or 5 years to say, like, this is it. Like, we have been starved for this, to get out of the manual minutia, right? And we've been starving for automation and innovation and prescriptive guidance and prescriptive and predictive, analytics. Here it is, right? Now we need to lean into this wave and ride it. And I think it is going to give the payroll leaders of the world the chance to elevate their skill sets, be change agents, be promoters of process improvement, be business leaders. I mean, they already are business leaders. They just don't have the time to go and lead their businesses.
Yeah.
And that's what I would love for the business to do is look to payroll to say, hey, think of the next merger and acquisition in if you're a mid-market or larger, or even small market companies now are buying things and merging. That is a critical strategic business decision that is really anchored against payroll and HR at the end of the day. If they don't do their job, the deal could fall through if payroll doesn't execute on getting them out of the system and getting them ready to process in sometimes 90 days, 120, 180 days. I've been on the end of that. That's scary when you're a payroll leader thinking, how on earth are we going to get this done? Well, now that's where AI comes in, right? And I think that's where AI can automate things and give payroll the ability to return their time to using their data to advise their business, to lead these projects, to manage change and invoke a future innovation sort of cycle. And that changes the role, right? That becomes a very different role. And payroll to me is well positioned for that. The skill sets of a payroll leader are really well positioned for that. So
Yeah.
yes, I do see AI as being very, very helpful for payroll, but we've got to get to a point just overall in any business to trust and govern AI properly. And I think payroll is going to need that times 2, right? Because the trust level for that is going to be uncompromising, right? It's one thing to give, the wrong slide on a PowerPoint presentation, internally in sales. It's a whole other thing to get an entire payroll process wrong and screw people's paycheck up, right? Or mess up taxes. So we're going to have an exponentially higher level of trust for what we're working with. But yes, I think it's going to shift payroll from that sort of, again, processor to, in payroll intelligence. And that's where the business can really, really use that.
Love that. Payroll intelligence,
Yeah.
right? We already
Yeah.
have
Payroll
it, gotta build
intelligence.
it on our own. And it is kind of funny
Yeah.
where the irony around we're essentially processing millions of dollars and we know everyone's
Yeah.
information, but we
Right.
won't be seated at a table about the next project coming. Like it's just I don't think
Yeah.
people in some executive seats understand like how backwards that is.
It's one of the most detrimental things, consequential things in the organization, yet it's sort of neglected completely as if it's not. And that's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
scary, very scary. So I see you're rocking Payroll Like a Boss t-shirt on.
Yeah.
Post on.
Shout out to John B and Tammy.
Yes. And so I would just say, like, look, I love it. I always see your hashtags, payroll influences everything. That is really true, right? It's just one of those things
Yeah.
where people don't realize that we are the ones influencing. We are the ones on the back end cleaning up when something is wrong. Rates, job titles, department structures, all of that, can feed into the general ledger that gets reconciled. I mean, there's a plethora of things, taxation.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when people don't understand what I do, I try to say, hey, the W-2 you go to file, like, I make sure your checks are correct, your taxes are correct, so that when you do go to file, you don't have any issues.
I
To
love
them,
it.
they just get the note, the letter, the form, and then they file it.
Yep.
But, like, if deposits aren't done properly, if nothing is set up correctly, that becomes a whole 'nother animal. So payroll, just the payroll process in general is just so incredibly important. And
It's an immense responsibility. It really is. And it doesn't matter if you're paying one person or 1 million, it's still an immense responsibility with the same amount of steps. And you've got to get it right. And no one expects it to be close. They expect it to be perfect.
yes,
And
very true.
that's few jobs. Few jobs have that.
Yeah. So I think we kind of alluded to it, but, like, if you could change a perception. So you've gone through the surveys. I'm sure there's probably been some shockers on, some of the data, but if you could change the perception of
Mhm.
the payroll world starting tomorrow, would it be, what we were kind of talking about, us needing a seat at the table, or would you focus on something else?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a combination of things. I think it's resourcing and engaging payroll appropriate to its risk and impact level. I think that's the easiest way to say it. And we just sort of said that in a very long form momentarily ago. But, really what I hope that people come away with in all of this is that we've been neglecting to extract the value payroll can provide. And again, you're talking, those are business leaders. So is HR. HR and payroll leaders are business leaders that can return immense business value. And now with this technology, now with at least, even if, and at least again, you call it a seat at the table, I would say just a line of sight, just a stream of communication, just being looped in to the conversation to be at those decision points that impact payroll's ability to impact the business, will take an investment in equal to what they need in terms of tech and people and process. That will exponentially provide ROI and value back to the business. And we show that in the PPCI. We show the difference when organizations lean into payroll versus those that don't. And it's exponentially different. What I hope we do is I hope we understand that we need to treat it with the measurement equal to its support, equal to its impact, and know that those business leaders can return real value if we listen to them and give them an opportunity.
Couldn't have said it better myself. But, before, I'd love to get just maybe future projection.
Yeah.
5 years from now, what do we think the job of a payroll leader looks like? I guess maybe some of the fundamentals that could potentially be different. We naturally, folks out there, this is not legal advice or anything of that nature. We're just our thoughts of what we think. But I'm curious to get your insight on how different you think payroll will look in a few years.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, look, I think we're going to, I mean, listen, people will always be foundational to these things, especially something like payroll, right? You need someone testing the water and saying, does this smell right? Does this taste right? Is this accurate, right? You're going to need human intelligence that understands what that AI is calculating and deciding such that those human, that human judgment is woven into all the outputs from payroll. So I think you're going to see a lot of machine oversight. I think you're going to see a lot more of the roles that you and I might have come up in where we might have been a processor or a clerk or whatever. I think those roles are going to become elevated. They're going to become much different, more specialized, tech-driven types of roles. And I think you're going to see the payroll role, especially the leadership, become much more oriented around strategic advisory, right? I think you're going to see payroll leaders being very tactically knowledgeable, very, very experts at compliance and all things payroll and process, but being able to bring that to the business and help the business make good decisions, be a strategic advisor to them as they're deciding on mergers and acquisitions and big org redesigns and moving into a new country or state or city or whatever. All of that requires very careful steps and processes, and payroll needs to be at the table, as we've sort of pointed out,
Yeah.
giving inputs to those things and helping business make good decisions. And what I hope for is that payroll will become much more of a Big Four consultant, much more of a change agent, much more of a a process improvement leader, and someone who's really trying to extract value out of payroll and return it back in the form of business, business impact and business ROI. And that's what I think we're doing. I think we're seeing, many organizations we're getting, our numbers are inching up slowly inside the report, and we're seeing that progress. And I think business leaders are turning and understanding that, hey, the risk that we are operating under with payroll is not equal to the way we've treated it, and we've got to make that happen in order for payroll to become part
Yeah.
of the bigger conversation. Yeah.
Ding, ding,
So
ding. Oh,
I
okay.
love it.
Okay, so PPCI, who's eligible?
Yeah.
I imagine just payroll practitioners. Where can they find it?
Actually, any stakeholder of payroll. If you're a finance director and you have payroll remit, if you are an HR director, whatever, I'm making up the title, but if you have any sort of oversight or stakeholdership for payroll in your organization, we would love for you to take the survey and give us your input. And one of the things I think people should know about this is incredibly unique. I don't know of another survey in the analyst space or in even consulting that like this. This research is entirely curated and created by payroll people for payroll people, with the purpose of elevating the way we talked about. It is completely free of PII, so we're not going to ask you for any personal information whatsoever, not your email, nothing about who you are in order to take the survey or receive the content. In fact, everything at Payroll Influences is completely open. And third, and best of all, there is zero monetization. I don't make any money off of this. No vendor is accessing or making money off of this. And that is very rare. You do not find research commonly in the market, especially when it's from an analyst, unless it is an entirely independent or vendor involved. There's generally not a lot in between. This is entirely independent. It is entirely untethered for any sort of monetization, but it is a survey-based thing. It's not something we're doing just internally in our own walls. We're taking it outward and saying, hey, give us your inputs and we'll tell the story. So I'd like to say it's payroll's megaphone. You yell into it and I'll amplify your voice. And so, yeah, just understand how special it is and know it's for you. It's by you and for you. And it's really about elevating this profession that elevated me.
Yeah, good. Great. Glad to hear. So look, we will have the link, listed here. I want encouraging everybody. I've already seen some of Pete's posts on just, all of the information. So I do love that we don't have any personal information, because I know a lot of people get funny about that with surveys, right? Where
Yeah.
they don't feel like things are truly anonymous, and then that scares people and they might
100%.
prevent them from speaking up too much. So I really want to point that out, that this is fully anonymous and no pressure on that. But please, pressure to do the survey, but no pressure on giving your information, just because that's just very important. And we want to hear from you. That's what we want to do, right? This is about you. We want to hear from you. And Pete is the person you want advocating for you, right? Like, I'm just going to say it again. He's with the big dogs. And so everything that comes through in this survey and is reviewed, I mean, he will be the one sitting at the table to be an advocate for you, whether you know it or not, right? Which nights, you don't know what day he's somewhere, but he's all over the U.S. and international. And I think it's just the right person to have this voice for all of us. So I really want to stress that and make sure people are comfortable taking the survey. And please give us your insight, because we're changing the future, right? We're changing the future trajectory.
Yeah,
And so
help us shape it. I
exactly,
appreciate you,
please.
Tiana. Thank you for that.
Yes.
No, it's wonderful. We want to, we want to amplify their voice. So take it and share it. That's the best way you can help out.
All righty. Well, thanks so much, Pete. Anything else you want to share before we close out about the survey, or anything that we
No,
didn't?
just want to say thank you to you and your audience. And look, if you guys, I'm about to go back out on the conference trail. I'm sure I'll see you, Tiana, at some event somewhere.
Yes.
And yeah, if you guys are out there, come up and say hi. Julie and I will be recording at HR Tech. We're going to be doing some things around the industry. I'll be at most of the major events, most of the major HR Tech events, I should say, FinTech events as well. So yeah, look for me. Let's get to know each other. Let's hang out. And if there's anything I can do to help, you just let me know.
Absolutely. And he is very helpful, you guys. So definitely take him up on that offer. But thank you so much, Pete. Really appreciate it. Glad I
Thank
can
you.
help push, this survey out. I always say I'm a payroll person at heart, and always going to advocate for my payroll peeps, because, we've been in the trenches, we've experienced it. We now see it in the consulting space, in the payroll world. So really happy to continue with this push. Absolutely. We'll see you also at some conferences. And to everyone else out there, please make sure you click the link, do the survey. Reach out to Pete if you have any, questions from your end. Send me a message if you have a message about anything, questions, inquiries, all that good stuff. But thank you all so much. And we will be back in another few weeks with another great episode. Thank you.